This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, and we are recording this on Tuesday, April 1st, which Eric and I were just talking about off air. We both hate April Fool's Day. What's your issue with the day, Eric?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of like to scroll through, X, Facebook, LinkedIn for that matter, any of them. I don't mind scrolling through all the platforms, but what happens is you can't trust anything. So I kind of just said to myself, I'm not going to be on the internet today. I'm just going to stay off. So if any news has broke, firstly, you can't even find out if it's real anymore. So apologies if anything really broke today, because I don't believe a thing.
Yeah, I have always felt like April Fool's Day is when people who aren't funny try to be funny or clever, and it's just ugh. Though that said, Mr. Testa a few years back, in fact, he actually went so far as to have a concept art, very good concept art made, by the way, talking about the replacement for Stitch's Great Escape. I want to say it was Olaf's Frozen Adventure, and it literally showed that theater space with an Olaf AA figure in the middle of the old Alien Encounter Stitch's Great.
Yeah, sure.
And it was like, oh, okay. And Len was like, and you'll help me with this, right? Because if you talk about it, people will think it's legit. It's like,
oh, geez.
Do I have to? I hate April Fool's Day.
Yeah, no, I saw a couple fake concept art going out there. I mean, with AI now, it's a lot easier to kind of create that. So I stayed away. So hopefully nobody will play until tomorrow.
Okay.
And continue, but we'll see what staggers through.
Now, speaking of playing, you and the family are off on another adventure shortly, right?
Well, yeah, Jim, we're actually going to head over to we're going to head down to Central Florida. We were very fortunate that a friend of ours had a timeshare, hotel deal, and they could not use it in time, and it was going to expire. So they're like, "Hey, do you want to use it?" And we're like, "Absolutely." So we were going to kind of elong the Easter holiday break from the kids and head down to Florida, which was fantastic because we're saying, all right, let's head to Universal. It just so happens, though, that when we bought our annual passes last year, that we opted for the 2-park Power Pass, which turns out we're blacked out. Except for Lauren. She was the one. We figured out the hack was, and somebody told us, is you buy at least one preferred, because if they're in the car, then you get the parking discount.
True,
and when you eat and purchase stuff, which let's know, Lauren has a merchandise podcast. She's the one purchasing stuff, right? So she has one, so she can get in the parks. But we're hanging out. It sounds to me like we might be able to get in on the 12th and the 13th. So that's our goal. Okay. But then from the 14th to the 19th, we're blacked out. So no Universal for us, I guess.
Okay, well, that said, I guess they're supposedly doing additional team member previews and that sort of thing of Epic Universe during that period. So if somebody wants to smile upon Eric and Lauren and the kids, you want somebody along with you for those days, you want to reach out. Though that said, did you see the thing online? And again, I do not know, and I want to apologize. Normally we have our info source, but this bubbled up this weekend that supposedly Universal has reached out to upwards of 300 team members.
Oh, yeah.
In regards to, evidently, the belief is, at least by Universal Orlando management, that, hey, the friend that you brought into the park who then posted stuff, on social media, we told you not to do that. So I don't know if this is true, but in some cases I'm hearing reprimands. In some places
Yeah.
I'm hearing fired.
Well, I have heard, and I was on the platforms, and there were a lot of leaks going on, and I was very, very close. I guess there was a pretty solid in ride spoiler of Dark Universe,
Oh
and
no!
yeah,
Okay.
no, I didn't catch any of them, but and then there was several like on coasters, I guess. Luckily, I stay away from all those spoilers, but if they are out there, that means someone took them, which means somebody is held liable. And yeah, the rumors were circulating that upwards of 300. And like I said, I don't know
Yeah,
how truthful that is.
I'm
But
hoping that's wrong. And at the same time, I have been trying to be good, Eric. I mean, with the exception of the wonderful photographs that our buddy BioReconstruct has taken,
right.
I'll look at those. All right, because I've been following those for years. But on the other hand, the in-park videos, the photos, that sort of thing, I'm trying so hard to be good, because when I see something like, for example, the band in the Isle of Burke, which seriously, it looks like a Hill family reunion. Like, even the women have mustaches. It's like, yes, those are my people. But yeah, I want to get in there and see it in real time and see it for the first time without it being spoiled. Though I do have to say, a new wrinkle in all of this. In fact, you're going to have to be my eyes and ears for a lot of this, because we just found out in the past week that Nancy needs hip surgery. And of course, we chat with the doctors and we get everything going. And so when is Nancy's surgery? It's May 20th, 2 days before the
Oh,
park
right.
opens.
Right.
So this means no flying, no driving, and she's got to do all the PT. So I'm thinking, realistically, I'm probably not going to get to see this park till after Labor Day.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to wait that long, there's a part of me that thinks I should wait for IAPA, the Attractions Expo. Are you familiar with this event when the themed entertainment business basically comes to Orlando and holds a trade show?
Oh
Uh,
yeah. I've been I mean, I follow it through you guys.
okay.
Truthfully, I mean, I think was it. I don't know if it was Len spoke at that a couple
He
years ago.
did. He did.
Right.
They love Len. But what's interesting about the Attractions Expo is they have, again, this is when, the folks actually build these things, get together and talk. And they also
Right.
do these amazing after hours parties and tours in the park. So I'm thinking, this being the first year of Epic Universe, that they probably offer some amazing things for IAPA Attractions Expo. So I might just bite the bullet and then go then. But at the same time, the hard reality is the way the park will operate in those first few weeks will not be the way the park will be operating in the late summer, early fall. Universal will learn the way people actually want to use these things and change procedures. So you're going to have to be the first guy through the door.
We're going first or second week of June. We're trying to figure out that. We got a graduating son who that was his before we even knew too much about Universal. He wanted to go to Super Mario Land or Super Nintendo Land, and we said, all right, we can make it happen. So we won't be there first week, second week. I mean, it's still going to be, I'm assuming, very, very busy when we're there. So I'm not going to necessarily love that aspect of it, but we won't hopefully be spoiled too much by the YouTube videos. I think I can hold off for a week or two.
I have to say, though, between the age range between Miles, Lanny, and Hunter, you have your own focus group there.
I do. Listen, and we bring the grandma. So the fact is, we absolutely have a focus group.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
When Touring Plan sends me their surveys after I go through, I can click all the boxes for them.
That's so cool. All right. Well, speaking of clicking all the boxes here, folks, one of the things we always have to do on this show is acknowledge our sponsor, which is, of course, the Be Our Guest Vacations. And if you're planning your next adventure, let the experts at Be Our Guest Vacations take care of the details. As a platinum level earmarked travel agency, they provide top tier concierge service for trips to Universal Orlando, Universal Hollywood, the Disney parks, cruises, and more. So Get started today with BeArGuestVacations.com and be sure to mention that the Epic Universal podcast sent you. So we're now in the news portion of the show. And of course, I want to say at the top of the show, Eric always puts in red the reminder that at this point, when this show goes live, we are 49 days out from when Epic Universe opens. So it's just 7 weeks, folks. And the folks at Comcast are pulling out the stops when it comes to promotion, right?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, you dropped the bomb there that you're not going to be able to travel too much, but they are actually, they might bring Epic Universe to you, Jim. Well, closer to you, I should say.
I was kind
Maybe
of
driving distance.
Yeah. What Eric is mentioning here is that there is a national Epic Universe portal tour coming. And what's interesting about this is it actually starts, in
days, right?
Yeah. In fact, if you want to go over to Lake Eola in Orlando on April 6th, how do they describe it? It's basically a giant photo op, right? That recreates.
Yeah, isn't it the giant Kronos tower? It's a giant portal tower, right?
Mhm.
And then they have interactive props. Sounds to me like live characters and some type of entertainment initiatives. And of course, they want you to share this on social media. This is the tour. This is what they want. They want to take it to these pockets. So they're going to Orlando and several other cities, right?
Yeah. Again, Orlando on April 6th, then a week later, up in Atlanta, Georgia, at Atlantic Station on April 13th. After that, on April 20th, they're up in Philadelphia at Penn's Landing. Again, that's April 20th. Then a week later in New York City, in Flatiron Plaza, the giant Kronos photo op will be set up on April 27th. And then finally, in Chicago, the city of big shoulders, in Pioneer Court on May 4th. And as Eric mentioned, interactive props, live characters, and I love the social media ready moments, which means you're basically standing in front of a video wall.
Right. Hashtags projected, you know what hashtags to use. They tell you kind of all that.
There you
and
go.
then you hope that, well, I mean, Jim, what's the closest? New York for you?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But again, this is the problem. One of the reasons that Nancy is having this hip replacement surgery. In fact, her theory, and I'm just putting this out there, she has a stress fracture of the ball at the top of her femur on her right side. And she's like, well, what could have caused this? And it's like, well, back in November, she and Angela were down in Orlando and she went to try to get on the Tron light cycle.
Oh, boy.
And fell. And, was embarrassed and got up, but she experienced leg pain since then. So I'm not saying it's the mouse's fault, but, not a person of a certain age friendly ride vehicle, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if you're an old fart like me that have to, yes, get on the fake motorcycle and put yourself in a weird position and go. So, that's the thing. Putting my bride in a car and doing a 4-hour drive down to New York City and then hobbling around a photo op and then doing a 4-hour drive home. I believe the phrase we use in a situation like this is cruel and unusual punishment. So, so I may miss out.
Yeah.
But I would like to see it. I would.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was going to say Philadelphia is about maybe 6 hours, but I've driven across the state of Pennsylvania, and that wasn't a fun drive. So that is cruel and unusual punishment as well. So we'll catch it when it opens down in Orlando.
We'll see the real thing, and you in June and me in September. Okay.
Right.
Anyway, but interesting that, by the time I show up in September, I wonder if there's going to be anything of Rip Ride Rockit left to see.
Oh, well, my kids would hope so. They love that. They appreciate that ride. But it sounds to me like the construction permit, and it was rumored I think we posted a show that talked all about it going down. But the construction permit actually came out on March 28th and references Project 902, which is the demolition and reconstruction.
Yep. Yeah, and again, what's fascinating about this is it's the coaster track that's being removed, and supposedly a number of the supports will be left in place uh, for a replacement coaster. Which, well, again, let's talk about this because what's kind of
Yeah, this is what's interesting because when we talked about it, we kind of alluded that it was Fast and Furious, right?
Mhm,
I
mhm,
don't remember if it was an Intamin coaster, but there was some type of talk in the previous episode months
mhm,
back. But the local, like on the forums, the fan forums right now
mhm.
are trying to say that it's going to be a Ghostbusters themed attraction. Have you seen this? And do you believe that there's any truth to this at all?
Well, now here's the thing. Okay, again, face it. Anybody who's been following what's going out at Universal Studios Hollywood, and I want to say it's Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift. Is that the
Yeah,
name of the
yeah,
coaster
I
out
think
there?
so.
Look, this is a company that's spending an awful lot of money developing a Fast and Furious coaster, and we have our brand new Fast and Furious film coming out in 2026. I want to say that's supposedly the grand finale of this franchise. And here's the thing, Mark Woodbury, the gentleman who's now in charge of the Universal Parks, who used to be in charge of Universal Creative, has very publicly said that, well, look, we have lots of wonderful IP here
Hmm.
at
Right.
Universal. We don't need to use other people's IP anymore. Though, that said, and I'm not at liberty to discuss how I would know this, um, but I've heard some very interesting things about the Universal London Park,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
frankly, this news has left me shaken and stirred. Eric,
Okay.
is that a big enough dinner?
Listen, I think I catch what you're saying there.
Okay,
I
I'm
do.
just saying, for a company that's supposedly just fine using its own IP, that's an interesting development, and we're just going to
Uh,
leave that there. Okay.
yeah, leave that there, Jim. But yeah, I guess I guess in the permit there was talking about vertical layout of like building upward. So a
Hmm.
lot of people were kind of saying, well, hey, it's back in that area, which is what, New York-ish. So they were
Hmm.
saying, but Jim, Ghostbusters has it? I mean, I know they had some films out
They
recently, but they
did.
didn't they didn't let the world on fire, right? They weren't that great.
Well, I have to say, again, I've explained my television viewing habits to, to listeners of Epic Universe. I get control of the television 20 minutes a night. All right.
Right.
As Nancy's getting ready for bed, I can finally take control of the television. And which is why I have seen the last 15 to 20 minutes of, I want to say, Ghostbusters Afterlife,
Right.
the first of the new films,
Uh-huh.
which is wonderful. I mean, it's just,
Okay.
I really, really enjoyed that. I have not seen the whole of the second modern Ghostbusters film. But no, I just wonder if that's, yeah, you're not wrong. I feel like, is that something we need to see back in the parks? Whereas, face it, with Fast and Furious, this is a Universal owned property that,
Right.
$1 billion earner for that matter. I just I know every so often, but that's the thing about the internet, is the fan community will put something out there and then it will echo. And the weird thing is the people who started the echo, will then point to the echoes as like, look, it's
Yeah.
proof. It's like,
Right.
no,
We're
see,
And us talking about it only helps the
there we
fuel. And
go.
I think it's wishful thinking, like personally,
Mhm.
and they could know that. I mean, there's definitely data. They're doing the mega movie parade, and there's a lot more Ghostbusters infused information there to say, hey, that people want this and that people will turn out for this. But truth, if I'm betting Fast and Furious, they're already building a coaster. They can take that same aspect,
Mhm.
run it through there, and I mean, and then maybe get space back where they have the Fast and Furious attraction now.
There we go. Now, speaking of people actually wanting things, your next news item about the monster makeup experience now being able to be booked at Epic Universe. I I don't know about this.
Okay? Well, they actually, even after I posted this yesterday, they posted a short video. Universal officially posted some videos of actually walking in and showing some of the makeup experiences. So you actually can see non-leaked but real approved versions of this. So what's your take on the makeup experience?
My problem with this, and again, I just want to preface this: I'm the moron who lives at the end of a dirt road out in the woods of New Hampshire, so I may know nothing. All right, but what I just want to stress here that, yeah, if we're talking bippity boppity boutique, and you're a little girl and you're a dad who wants to make an impression, and you buy the dress, and you buy the hair, and you buy the makeup, and you buy the shoes and the wand. But remember, there was the pirate version of this where they
Right.
tried to do it for little boys, and it just didn't take. And I just wonder how many people. I mean, I know this is the land you're most excited about, Dark Universe. You personally,
right?
And I maybe I'm wrong. Think about it. Tens of thousands of people go every night that Halloween Horror Night is offered in Orlando and Hollywood and even in Singapore. So there are a lot of Universal horror monster fans. So maybe there's a huge audience for this. But I just, it's like, how many people are like, I'm going for the day to Epic Universe, and oh yes, I want to spend
It's $150.
$150.
That's the thing.
Well,
I mean,
never mind that, but it's actually Jim Schul on our most recent Disney Unpacked pointed this out, and the hard reality is for so many folks who are going to a theme park, they have 8 hours. They get up in the morning, they get in the car, they drive over. They got 8 hours to see this place. And it's like, never mind that it's $150 to get the makeup. You got to sit in that chair for an hour.
That's money.
That's, it's more to the point. That's your
money and time. Yeah.
And again, don't get me wrong. I want this to succeed. I really do. But again, I just look at that and go, is this pirates again? My God, by the time I get there in September, it's like, this is where you can get your Gilman hat, because the makeup
right.
place closed.
Right. Well, let me tell you, I've been in this situation many a times. Mm-hmm. So they do have little paint stands, paint face, stands all over Disney. You don't, and I think to myself, I don't see too many kids walk. You'll see a Spider-Man here and there, but you can essentially get your face painted at Disney and probably in Universal. I haven't necessarily checked that part out. One thing that happened, you're saying they have 8 hours. I know for a fact that later in the day, like if you want your face painted, you want to be able to utilize it the whole day. Or like if you do Bippity Boppity Boutique, we always try to get it first thing in the morning because you don't want half the day where you're kind of not dolled up, and then you want to get your money's worth and get your pictures. And so I don't even think you have the full 8 hours. You're all going to try to book it early, and then if you're going to take a midday break and go swim, then I would say, no, you're not going to do it. We've had many conversations with my kids about face painting and how this works and maybe better use of time and money. But needless to say, Jim, I will pay one time to have Miles dressed up as a Wolfman. Okay. I will absolutely do that one time.
And if we're picking a child to turn into Wolfman, Miles is the guy. He's be perfect. Great. He would be perfect. So, all right. Now, speaking of how people spend their cash at the Universal parks, we've had the Epic Universe Express Pass pricing revealed, right?
Yeah, well, we talked about it last show that was hinted on a bus, and we were like, I don't know, but yeah, it was like the next day it dropped, and essentially prices start at $90, vary by date. Peak days cost significantly more, as we would know, but they do have the rides listed, which Stardust Racers, Curse of the Werewolf, Hiccups Wing Gliders, and Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge are all eligible for Express Pass. So, I kind of listen. I mean, I've been listening to Len and your show, and I mean, Len is almost saying like, this is what you do, right? He was convinced when you guys go out to FanFest to buy the Express, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about the money value, but in a busy park, you got to assume the park is going to be very, very busy.
This is
and
true.
You're going to be waiting in lines if you want to hammer it all out. And a lot of us only have one day, right? Annual pass, you can buy one day to do it.
Oh,
It's
you touched briefly on FanFest, which again coming up tail end of this month. What's fascinating is evidently the folks out in Hollywood have just put up a billboard. I don't know if you saw this bubble up on social media today, but it's literally a recreation of the Back to the Future billboard from 1985. Is that right?
Oh, that's awesome.
So
Is it done in a universal style? Remember those great billboards down? I
well,
know that
no,
was in Orlando, but
no, this is actually the movie poster from
oh,
'85.
all
So
right.
it's like, if you remember, this one was Set Your Watches, and it's Marty
Mhm.
looking at, stepping out of the driller and looking at his watch, but it's a countdown to the start of the event, FanFest.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
yeah,
Well, they seem like the headliners. They're getting a lot of stuff, and I know that your favorite's not getting as much love right now, but
yeah.
One
Again,
Piece
I'm really
One
looking
Piece might
forward
get
to
there.
yeah, the One Piece broom closet. Come on, jeez. All right, but again, something that I was looking forward to when I got down to Orlando was this super deluxe version of CineSational, the nighttime show, which projections and fireworks and drones, which
Yeah.
that's not happening, right? Still.
Well, that's what it sounds like. I mean, I wasn't able to find too much, but it came up. I like to go search on Reddit before we have a show just to see what's kind of bubbling up. And somebody asked if the drones were back, and we did have there was a individual that kind of answered
Mhm.
that is basically saying, will it be back when they come? When the show comes back, and it says it's unlikely because the Sky Element special permission to operate drones for shows is still suspended by the FAA since the December City of Orlando incident, which,
Yeah.
if you recall, I think somebody was either horribly injured or even almost killed from a drone in a nearby city.
Yeah, just a drone literally fell out of the sky. I want to say on an 8-year-old boy.
Yeah,
But what's interesting about this is that we've been hearing about Isle of Berg and
right.
having that there's going to be supposedly at least two dragons that fly over the land that are oversized drones. And what's interesting, we're supposed to get these daily in Isle of
Right.
Berg. Whereas,
Right.
if you remember, for the opening of Galaxy's Edge back in 2018,
Mhm.
they got for the opening night, they got, I want to say, two X-wing drones flew over the park.
Yeah.
And never to be seen again. Sort of like the dragon that flew over New Fantasyland at the Magic Kingdom for the opening night party, and I was in the bathroom.
I
You know,
remember. Yeah, I remember
grrr,
that story, Jim.
yeah, food poisoning.
Well, we
So
were hoping that this wasn't going to be the case. You wouldn't be able to be in the bathroom every single time at Epic if they have them multiple times. But
there we go.
and there was a test earlier, and was it this summer?
Mhm.
Because my mother-in-law sent it over to me. She's like, "Look at this," and it was actually a dragon flying in the distance. Somebody got it from a hotel room, and it looked very much reminiscent of the one that was in Fantasyland, but never to be seen again, heard of. But so there was definitely testing, right?
Okay.
But is
So,
that going to happen? Do we
well,
think
now
that's going to happen?
here's the interesting part, and in fact, because I want to say this weekend at California Adventure, the on the Avengers campus, they have used the roof space. In fact, over the irony is that the roof space that they're over is where the post show gift shop for the new what is it, if Infinity Defense, the super
Okay,
deluxe
yeah,
e-ticket
yeah,
that's being built
yeah.
there. But yeah, this is eventually where the gift shop will be located for that ride. But what's interesting is that, of course, what you see are all the Avenger heroes du jour fighting on that rooftop, near the Quinjet. But here's the thing, Eric: the Quinjet at both California Adventure as well as the Avengers campus that was built at Walt Disney Studios Paris, soon to be, what is it? Disney Adventure World, whatever they're redubbing that park. That thing was supposed to fly in and out every day. The Quinjet was supposed to be this giant drone that would fly in from backstage and periodically fly out. So, you'd have this amazing kinetic in the land. But as it was explained to me, Disney's lawyers effectively came to them and said, okay, here's the deal. You can use this, but can only fly during these wind speeds. More to the point, there always have to be 2 cast members in high enough positions in the park that whenever this thing takes off, they have to have clear line of sight. So at a moment's notice, if something goes south, they can shut it down. And it was literally one of these situations where it was like, the lawyers have made it so difficult to use this, and the expense of having 2 cast members always have to watch this thing, and then it takes off, and it just wasn't practical. In fact, oddly enough, this is the exact same reason that the red car just got shut down at California Adventure.
Too many people running out in front of it?
Well, I don't know. It's so interesting.
Or two cast members, right?
That's it, exactly. You had a driver, and then you had, I want to say there was a cast member on board doing a spiel while the driver was watching, the street. Right. And then you had 2 cast members who were walking ahead of the thing, effectively saying, please step on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Here comes the red car. We don't want you to get hurt. And it was just the notion of every time that thing rolled out of the barn, you had to pay 4 employees. And just the park after 12 years, because remember, this thing had been up and running since 2012.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I don't know if we want to spend that money anymore. And basically use the excuse of, well, we could use the barn where we store the red car at night as additional space for Infinity Defense. Is like, good, solid, shut it down. So
yeah, they just needed that excuse. Well, no, I understand. The cool thing, I mean, the drones are absolutely fantastic. I saw the CineSational, and the drones do make a lot of that show.
They do.
So we'll see if we can get in there those 2 days we're not blacked out, and if they have the show going, I'll tell you what the difference is. But I just often think to myself, man, if this technology existed in the 60s, there were no regulations. We'd have everything. It wouldn't matter. Like they'd be able to fly it, whatever. I remember the opening of Disneyland and Tomorrowland. They had a guy in a jetpack flying overhead. They didn't care about any possible accidents. So, oh well.
And speaking of the 1960s, when we get back from this break, we're going to continue the story we began last week about Mardi Gras de Mexico, which, by the way, if your idea of an entertaining evening is knocking back at tequila shots and seeing an Aztec princess almost get sacrificed, hey, this is your groove, folks. All right, but we'll talk about more of that in a moment. But first, this
episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit TemptationsTreats.com to learn more.
TaxAct knows small business owners can sometimes use a little help with their taxes. That's why TaxAct has Expert Assist, a team of live tax experts ready to answer any questions you may have. Think of them as your own personal sidekick. Not like one of those funny talking animal sidekicks, more like the super smart nerding out on tax code and business casual attire sidekick, but just as helpful and lovable. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse, only on Netflix.
Okay, and we're back. All right, so Eric, picking up where we left off last week, and evidently people like this feature because a number of Epic Universal podcast listeners wrote in to ask about the Visitor Village, that new entrance complex for the Universal City Tram Tour that opened in June of '65, and just this past week, in fact, I was just showing this to Eric. Before we get started here tonight, I acquired, as part of that eBay buying spree I mentioned on last week's show, a special supplement to the New York Times that was published on March 14th, 1965. So effectively, what, 60 years ago?
Yeah, sure.
Last month. Okay. Which celebrated the 50th anniversary of Universal City Studio. And again, not Universal Studios, but Universal City Studios, which is this 24-page full-color magazine type thing says is a division of MCA. Anyway, towards the very back of this newspaper supplement is a 2-page spread that talks up the newly opened tram tour at Universal City Studios, how out in Hollywood, a visitor's dream can finally come true. And here's you're going to love this 60s era's text, Eric. Okay. Now, for the first time, Universal City Studios has opened its gates into the celluloid world of make-believe, offering spectators a close-up view of Filmland with its work sleeves rolled up. God.
Oh, boy.
With its work sleeves rolled up. I love that. Okay. But wait, it gets better. Surrey-topped open-air trams carry visitors through the innermost recesses of the studio's 410 acres grounds, revealing little-known facets of the art of motion picture making. And it finishes off with a 10-acre visitor village, which will feature scores of special displays and live action events, is rapidly nearing completion on a leveled hillside overlooking the studio grounds. Here, guests can spend as much time as they want.
I'm sold, Jim. I'm going to roll my sleeves up and I'm heading there.
There we go. There we go. But what's especially cool about this 50th anniversary Universal City newspaper supplement is it features a site plan for what was originally going to be called the Hollywood Visitor Village at Universal City Studios. And again, the thing I think fans of this podcast will especially want to see is it includes an architect's rendering of what was supposed to go where.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right. So, which is how we now know in this $5 million addition to Universal City's tram tour. And remember, they spent this money after they'd had a successful first summer. So it's like, all right,
Yep.
let's spend some dough. But the thing is, it was going to include an exhibit where guests were going to get to tour Jack Benny's vault. Now, Eric, are you familiar at all with the comedian Jack Benny?
I know the name and I'm probably seen him, but you're going to have to give me some more detail, I guess.
Okay. Now, Jack was a hugely popular comedian, started movies, TV, radio from the early 1930s. In fact, right up to when we lost this guy in December of 74. In fact, interesting little side story here. Jack Benny was actually supposed to have starred with Walter Matthau in the movie version of Neil Simon's The Sunshine Boys. But then, little after Jack had done the makeup test, he was effectively felled by pancreatic cancer. We lost him at 80. But now, George Burns, right?
Yeah, I do, yes.
Okay. George Burns was Jack Benny's lifelong friend. In fact, they often performed together. And what was fascinating is after mourning the death of his pal, the folks at MGM who were getting ready to make Sunshine Boys were like, well, could you do this instead of Jack? And not only does George Burns do the role, he actually wins the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor that year for stepping in for his late great friend. And in fact, that's George Burns that has, a 20-year career on the back of that success, and all of it because after his friend died, and it's like, we're not going to make this movie unless somebody steps into this role, and Burns says it.
Wow.
But anyway, Jack Benny, what was different about Jack Benny is he was a character comic. In that, whenever he did his radio show or TV show or films and that sort of thing, he played this guy who was very vain. I mean, for example, he always insisted he was 39 years old. He was also famously cheap. In fact, there's this great story about the longest recorded laugh in radio history actually came on Jack Benny's radio show in March of 1948. Well, the setup for this gag, folks, is that Mel Blanc, and yes, that Mel Blanc.
Okay.
All right, the guy who originally did Looney Tune voices like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, he's playing a petty thief who stops Benny on the street and sticks a gun in his face. And so, Mel says to Jack, your money or your life. And there's this pause. And the audience then starts to laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. And then finally the laugh dies down and Mel goes, well, and Benny's like, I'm thinking. I mean, but again, great character-driven laugh. And again, this was because the people who were listening to the Jack Benny radio show knew this character was famously cheap, tight with the buck. In fact, to get back to the vault that they had established on the Jack Benny TV show, that in his basement at his house was this vault where Jack kept his money that had all of these elaborate booby traps and literally had a moat that had alligators in it and things like that. Huh. But all right, so if we now go to the site plan for the Hollywood Visitor Village at the Universal City Studios, and again, this is in the newspaper supplement, March 14th, 1965, it shows that this 10-acre attraction was going to have an elaborate walkthrough recreation of the vault at Jack Benny's house. But here's the thing, Eric. When the ribbon gets cut for this $5 million addition to the Universal Tram Tour, then 3 months later, this attraction nowhere to be seen. And the reason that is on April 15th, 1965, the Jack Benny Show ended its 15-year run on NBC. And Benny had turned 70 the year previous and had seen far too many of his show business colleagues linger in the spotlight beyond their expiration date. And what's interesting is, as far as Jack Benny was concerned, knowing when to make an exit was almost as important, maybe even more important, as knowing how to make an entrance. And also worth noting here that when Johnny Carson stepped away from The Tonight Show in May of 1992, he often cited his childhood show business idol, which was Jack Benny, as the reason he did what he did. That, just like The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, the ratings for the Jack Benny Show, which, by the way, was shot on the Universal lot. That's why they were going to do the vault. They were literally going to take the pieces of the vault that Jack used on his show and use them in this exhibit. But the ratings for the Jack Benny Show were still strong on NBC, and Benny just decided that year, it's like, I want to go out on top. But now here's the problem, Eric, that it leaves the people who are putting together the visitor village with an empty spot along a European Street. And by the way, that's what this part of the 10-acre thing was called. And by the way, this was also going to be right across the street from where they were going to build a full-size recreation of Grandpa Munster's lab. And what was cool about this is you could walk in and throw a switch, and suddenly all this electricity would arc around the room. And there was a Herman Munster figure on the slab that would then come to life, and a mechanical bat would fly overhead. I mean,
it sounds like Monsters Unchained.
There we go.
Right. Look at that. Spoilers. Sorry.
So, but here's the thing: they've got 3 months till the park opens. Well, what are we going to put in this building? We're building, and so the irony is, to replace Jack Benny, they go with something even older, which is the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Okay.
All right. So that film series gets started at Universal March of 54, does well enough that there are 2 sequels, 1955's Revenge of the Creature and 56's Creature Walks Among Us. And Eric, this is, such a cool, in fact, what's interesting is you can go online and there are people who have both photographs as well as their little 8mm camera version of this meet and greet. And,
oh, really? So you were meeting him?
Well, but here's the thing: you didn't necessarily, you weren't supposed to know this. I want to say for a time it was called The Scene Under the Sea, but here's the gimmick. In fact, it actually, we talked a little bit about this on the most recent Disney Unpacked. it had an illusion very reminiscent to the evil queen in that window outside of Snow White's Scary Adventure, the one that would open the curtain, look at you, and glower. So for the Creature from the Black Lagoon meet and greet, people enter this building, which is lit to look like you're underwater. And the guests are then directed to the wall of kelp in the back of the room. And, the attendant who's like, give me your camera, or give me, I'll take your picture. And so they pose them in front of that. And then the attendant has 2 foot pedals in front of him. And he stops up with his left foot. The kelp curtain opens, and it's the Creature from the Black Lagoon, hidden behind there. But
great.
The kicker is he has a pedal to the right that, he makes the guest, aware of what's going on. So they turn and look. He hammers on the next pedal, which makes the monster lean forward. So, so there's all these wonderful footage of people just, as the Creature from the Black Lagoon leans forward. But all of it captured in really bad 8mm movie camera footage.
Oh, well, I'm going to seek that out. Listen, I really do hope that's the kind of stuff they have.
Mm-hmm. But again, but cheap but effective. And especially when you think about last minute replacement for the Jack Benny's Vault. And but again, the folks who ran Universal City Studios really had to think on their feet a lot during the mid 1960s. And we'll get to that part of the story in a moment. But first, this.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
Canva presents a work love story like no other. Meet Productivity. She's all business.
The Canva doc is done.
Creativity is more of a free thinker.
Whiteboard brainstorm.
They're worlds apart, but sometimes opposites attract. Thanks to Canva.
The data is in the deck.
And now it's an animated graph.
Canva, where productivity meets creativity. Now showing on computer screens everywhere. Love your work at canva.com.
This episode is brought to you by SelectQuote. Life insurance can have a huge impact on our family's future. With SelectQuote, getting covered with the right policy for you is simple and affordable. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents will tailor your experience to find a life insurance policy for your needs in as little as 15 minutes. And SelectQuote partners with carriers that provide policies for many conditions. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Go to selectquote.com/SpotifyPod today to get started.
All right, and we're back. Before we continue here, Eric, I wanted to point out that that evil queen in the gag thing, Universal has revisited that idea. When you were in the park...
I know where you're talking, Jim.
There we go. All right.
I seeked it out at Diagon Alley outside, right?
That's right. Number 12, Grimaldi Place. This is to the far right side, by the way, folks, of the London waterfront, facing out toward the lagoon at Universal Studios, Florida. But if you stand there long enough, you will actually see a curtain get pulled back, and it's Creature, the house elf. And you've watched all of the Harry Potter movies at this point, so you know who Creature is, right?
We binged them before we went. Yeah,
there we go.
This was definitely, we're standing out there, and you can meet the you can go to the night bus too, right next to it. So it's right outside there. You stand there long enough, you will see this.
There we go. And again, it's a great bit of storytelling, great bit of placemaking.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, so to get back to last week's show, we talked about the fire that happened in May of '67. Who did $1 million worth of damage, burned down 3 acres in the very center of the lower lot. And that disrupted the tram tour operations for a few weeks during the summer of '67 because, well, first they had to figure out think about it. You got to figure out a new tram route. Not only that, you have to these sets, they lost a good chunk of Spartacus Square, they lost a good chunk of Little Europe. These are sets that were still being used by productions at Universal, and so it's like, all right, we got to rebuild those. And at the same time, we also have to, there are sound stages around there that frankly don't want to hear power drills or that sort of thing. It was a challenging summer. So anyway, summer of 68 rolls around, and Universal now wants to give Southern California locals a reason to return to this tourist attraction. And which is why they begin talking up this brand new after hours event at Universal Studios. And I'm now quoting from the brochure, which we will share an image of in the show notes. But from July 19th through September 2nd on what is, again, now being called the Universal Studios Entertainment Center. Evidently, the Hollywood Visitor Village name confused people. So, all right.
It was pretty long, Jim. It was pretty long.
There we go. So now it's the Entertainment Center. But for $2.50 per adult and $1.50 for children under 12, you could spend an exciting summer night in Old Mexico. And now remember, this event, the Mardi Gras de Mexico, was inspired by a Disneyland Salute to Mexico, which ran for 3 months at that theme park, summer of 63. They just took a single street off of Main Street, Center Street, and dressed it up to look like a Mexican bazaar. Well, Universal felt, okay, we have to top Disney, which is why instead of a single street, Universal City Studios, and again, quoting directly from the brochure here, we've brought Mexico here, a full-size Mexican village with music, dancing, singing, shopping, art treasures, churros, and bullfights, wining and dining in a tequila bar, more music, and the spectacular Indian flyers. This is fun for everyone, Mexico style. Now, let's break that down. Okay, so interesting thing is that Universal, because again, they want to give people something special for summer 68, they turn to the folks who actually build the sets for Universal's feature films and television productions. They have to turn a good chunk of that 10-acre flattened hilltop into an authentic Mexican village, complete with a plaza and fountains, Eric. And then directly adjacent to this is a full-sized shopping bazaar. Dozens of stalls selling the finest of Mexican handcrafts, leatherwork, ceramics, glassware, rugs, jewelry, hand-hammered copper, hand-woven fabrics. And again, I apologize if this is somewhat offensive, but the brochure actually does say this, that all of this stuff straight from Mexico, and again, this is the language used in the brochure, at Mexican prices. All right. And again, we mentioned there's music, there's dancing, and I swear to God, because I showed Eric this photo, and we will include this, the pageant of the sacrificed maiden. And this is how it's described in the program, folks.
Oh, gosh.
All right. One of the more dazzling events is the nightly Aztec ceremony, which segues from the symbolic sacrifice of a luckless Aztec princess to the thrilling aerial climax of the Papantla Flyers. And Eric, okay, do you know what the Papantla Flyers are?
Jim, I have no idea. That could be a bird. It could be at this point in time, I have no idea.
All right. The interesting thing is the brochure stresses this is the first appearance in the Los Angeles area of this death-defying troupe. And why use the phrase death-defying troupe? Well, this is a description of their act. From high atop a 100-foot tall pole, 4 colorfully costumed Native American performers plunge like hurtling hawks through the air, their falls only broken as ropes lash to their ankles, stop them and start them wheeling in great circles around a pole as they return to Earth. Each of these flyers, by the way, has to make 13 circles around the pole before they reach the ground. And meanwhile, high atop the pole, their chief beats a drum, plays a flute, and dances on the top of the pole.
What? Hold on. So essentially they're climbing poles. I swear I saw this one time. I was watching old World's Fair stuff, and I think they had pole dancers at the 64 World's Fair. Okay.
It's entirely possible that's where, in fact, I would bet that's likely where this was seen and then brought to Los Angeles. But at the same time, I know I've seen something similar on old ABC Wide World of Sports when they periodically cut away from the guy bashing himself as he skied down a hillside. They would also show this as, don't do this, don't try this at home, kids. And by the way, the flying pole dance, Papantla, hundreds of years old, and it's believed that this was tied to how the Indians kept time. That evidently the Indian calendar is based on a measure of 52, and that the four flyers making 13 circles around this pole before they finally reach the ground. 4 times 13 is 52, and again, that's a number of years in an Aztec Indian century. So you've learned something here, folks. All right.
Yes.
Anyway, again, all this entertainment for just $2.50 for adults, $1.50 for kids. And by the way, as the brochure states, just 3 minutes from Hollywood and Vine. Just the notion is you could be downtown, just up the street from the El Capitan, or you could go watch a virgin sacrifice. I mean, it's entirely up to you how you want to spend your time in Hollywood. So how does this after hours event get us to Halloween Horror Nights, or for that matter, to the first permanent effects-driven addition to the tram tour? Sorry, folks, you're going to have to come back for next week's show to hear that part of the story. And as I mentioned, we will include, as part of the show notes for this particular episode, we'll give you image of the Visitor Village site plan, a photo of that Aztec, princess sacrifice show. Not to mention, you can actually see on the lower, or that hilltop, where they set up this 100-foot pole, and where the flyers leaped off and began swirling around.
Oh, there we go. Well, that was fascinating. I didn't know what we were getting into today, Jim. I didn't know the sacrifices and pole climbing was going to be part of this show, but I'm happy you found that article, and yeah, we'll get that up on the internet for everyone.
Very cool. So, all right. So I think with that, we should bring this week's edition of the Epic Universal podcast to a close. So, Mr. Hersey, before we hit the road and head out for it's around Easter, right? That's when you're going to be down there?
Yeah, we're going to be back on Easter. We're coming back, and we'll be home on Easter Sunday. So we are going to be gone the week before. So it'll be real fun.
Okay, and again, if somebody at Universal Orlando wants to take a Hersey or two to go see Epic Universe, who am I to say? Just don't get the poor employee in trouble. Okay, that's all I ask. Right. So, all right.
Well, you're right. You'll never catch me posting anything on Instagram or X, where you can find me at Eric Hersey, about anything unfortunate like that. I'll never do that. Wow. And neither will Jim, and you can follow Jim where?
I'm sorry. I just have to applaud that very smooth transition. Wow, that was good. Yes, social media-wise, you can find me on X and Instagram at Jim Hill Media, and then over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And with that, that's going to wrap things up for this week's show, folks. So thanks, as always, for listening. And stick around, because we've got something coming up that will tell you what else is going to be happening this month on the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and if you like what you heard, head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. This really helps get the word out about our shows. We also have some other shows on the network that you might like. Each week, we drop a brand new Disney dish with Lon Testa. For animation and movie news, please listen to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor. By the way, you can also check out Drew's other podcasts, like The Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which he does with Charles Hood. For all things Lucasfilm, why don't you subscribe to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gahn? Likewise, we have I Want That Too with the lovely Lauren Hersey, our weekly podcast that features the latest merch and the stories behind that merch. And our Epic Universal podcast takes a look at the Universal theme park. So please join Eric Hersey and I on that weekly. If you enjoy theme park history, we also host Manufacturing the Magic with Shelley and Noah Valladolid. That podcast tells the story of how we got the modern theme parks that we enjoy today. Join myself, Len Testa, and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul for our latest season of Disney Unpacked, our first ever video series exclusively for Patreon. These get released first Sunday of every month, and each month we release several exclusive podcasts to help support this video series. I want to thank everyone that supports the Jim Hill Media Network. For more information about podcasts and content, head on over to jimhillmedia.com. So that's going to do it for now, folks. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch up on the next show.